Well, all right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another special broadcast. We are broadcasting across several channels tonight, several different platforms. I am very excited to have a young lady with me tonight who has become a dear friend of mine. I have known her for about 4 years, thereabouts, maybe four and a half through social media, but in person 4 years. I've ministered together with her. I trust her. She's actually been with me before. And so I'm going to ask her to introduce herself. And after she does, we will introduce this subject and pray and get rolling. But this is Prophet Andrea Hess. And the first time I started talking to her, I was calling her Andrea. And
Yes.
she said to me, "No, it's Andrea." I said,
Yes.
"Oh, excuse me." And then I said, "Why Andrea?" And she said, "Well, I would rather be than eh." And I said,
That's exactly
"That
right.
works for me." So whenever I'm not sure, I just remember and then I always pronounce her name correctly.
Uh-huh.
But this is Prophet Andrea Hess. And Andrea, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell folks about you, and we'll get rolling.
Okay. I have been the house prophet of Full Gospel Covenant Church for about 5 years. But even before that, I was raised in church, and I've seen a lot of different movements, a lot of different things. Some good, some not so good. And so, there's just things that sometimes happen in the body, and you're like, I'm not sure that that's the Lord. And then there's other things, and He begins to grow you and mature you the more you stay in and learn and are teachable. But I have probably been in ministry since I was a teenager, and off and on doing different things. Started in children's church ministry, and I before I got into the prophetic ministry, I was in the dance ministry. So I did a lot of prophetic dance and ministered that way with flags. And so I could probably tell you what all the different colors of flags mean. And we have a lot of different prophetic flagging, even at our church. And every time those are waved, it's a prophetic decree. And so I could probably even tell you about all of those things. But tonight, especially, I want to focus on being a house prophet and what that looks like and what that means. And it's probably not exactly what everyone would think.
I would venture to say that that is probably a very safe assumption, that it's not what everyone thinks. And we are going to have a discussion and a dialogue tonight. And I told Andrea before we went live tonight that, I plan these broadcasts out usually anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks in advance. And one day I was just thinking, and it just rose up out of my spirit, get a hold of Andrea and do a broadcast about being a house prophet. And it was a no brainer when the Lord just had that rise up in my spirit. And the reason I believe that the Lord wants to deal with this is because, number one, many people don't know what a house prophet is.
Mhm.
Many people that think they know what a prophet is
Mhm.
don't know what a prophet is.
Right.
Many people don't understand metrons and spheres of authority, shared
Mhm.
responsibility, and all these different kinds of things that we're going to get into tonight. And we are going to get into them. But before we do, let's pray. Father, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to have this broadcast tonight. I thank you for my sister who I love, who I've worked with, who I honor and respect, and I trust. Holy Spirit, rise up in her, live big in her tonight, and let her tongue be the pen of a ready writer, that you would release wisdom and revelation through her mouth as she speaks tonight. I pray that lights will go on over people's heads, almost like in the cartoon when the lights go on. I pray that illumination will come to people, even things that maybe they've heard from others in the past that did not register or sink in. but because they're heard from another voice or in another way, a light will go on. Thank you that we will advance the kingdom tonight, that revelation, wisdom, and understanding will come. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I'm going to begin by just asking a couple of questions. And again, I told this to Andrea privately before we went live, and I'm just going to state it flat out in front of God and everybody. She is one that many times when I go to the church in Odessa, to Full Gospel Covenant Church, Apostle Catherine, who is on right now, she gave us a hello, you guys. Um, she's the house apostle, the set woman of the house, and Prophet Andrea is her partner. She is the house prophet.
Yes.
They are a apostle prophet team. And either that church and those folks, either they really love me or they are gluttons for punishment, one of the two.
We love you.
Because they've had me there 4 years in a row, and next year will be 5. And I love going there. I love doing ministry together with them. And we text, we talk, we share. And I've had lengthy conversations with both of them on the phone through the years. And Andrea is one that I am comfortable when I am ministering or have prayer lines that many times I'll just call her over to minister with me. I'll know that there's things that she has to impart to people that I don't have, and that they need the impartation from the mantle that she carries. I trust her. I honor her. I love her. And she calls me Uncle Mike, Papa Mike, and all that stuff. And that's fine. But I just want to publicly state that I honor her as a gift of God to the body of Christ publicly. And I'm excited that she's with me. Now, Prophet, we were talking right before we went live about many people don't even know
Right.
what a prophet is. They think they know
Yeah.
what a prophet is. Tell me from your perspective.
Well, to me, a prophet should reveal the heart of God. But a prophet in the office of a prophet is an equipping prophet. And they should be in the house of God. If they're not in the house of God, then how can they be an equipper of the body? They need to be in the house of God. So there's a lot of people that are going around calling themselves prophets, but they don't even have a house that they belong to or a people they're equipping. And so to me, you have to be that. If Ephesians 4 says that a prophet is the foundation, that apostles and prophets make up the foundation, it requires both of those things in the house to build the body. And without those gifts being in the house, then the body is lacking. And it actually says it requires the fivefold ministry to equip and to mature, to bring to maturity the people that are coming to learn and be equipped. To bring them to maturity, you have to have that fivefold in operation in the church. And so that's something that I think that people overlook, but you're not going to mature people unless you have all of those giftings operating in the house. And I think that a house prophet needs to be one that carries humility. And I think that takes time to work out because, you know, a lot of times prophets can carry a know-it-all attitude, and that is not helpful. It can be unhelpful. And I have had, you know, some of that worked out of me. So I'm not saying that, you know, without going, I've had to work through some of those things because you're hearing the voice of God. So there's things that you know, but you still have to be able to submit those to others in your leadership and sometimes even defer to them and to what their decision to do and not be so arrogant as to go, well, God said. So who are you to disagree with what God said? And that's an arrogance that is sometimes found in people that God begins to should be working out of them if they remain faithful if they remain in the house of God. And what tends to happen is they get offended and they go out, and then they have all these reasons for why they can't be in the church. And to me, that is a deception that God is trying to clean up and correct, because prophets are very much needed in the body and needed in the house of God to equip and to build.
Now, I love your answer for several reasons. And I don't know if anybody caught this, but when I asked Prophet, what does it mean to be a prophet to her? She talked about the heart of the Father. She talked about laying foundation, and she talked about equipping. Those were the 3 bullet points to what she sees as being a prophet. Notice the word, the ability to prophesy, was not mentioned anywhere in her description in what a prophet is. Boy, does that just throw everything against the status quo of the modern prophetic movement. Talk about that, sis.
Well, I can prophesy.
Well, I know you can.
That is not one of the requirements. I think one of the main things is having a heart for God, because, or carrying His heart, because then you care about, you're focused on what He's focused on first. That's your primary thing. And but I've seen, I mean, that's what people typically think a prophet is, and they typically think personal prophecy, which is just a basic, that's just a gift in that's, 1 Corinthians 12, all of those giftings that are there. And that's one of the gifts. And it says to ask for that gift because it edifies the body, but that does not make you a prophet. Just because you can prophesy or even operate in any of those gifts does not make you a prophet. It says in 1 Corinthians 12 that He gives those gifts as He wills or as He determines to, and it's not just to one person that carries all those gifts. He says gives to another, gives to another, gives to another, gives to another. Because there's a lot of people that walk around and think, well, I carry the fullness of God. And yes, we have the fullness of God by the Holy Spirit indwelling in us, but we don't all operate in all of them, because God wants a diverse body. And He wants us to not have these huge puffed up heads. Look at me, I can do all this stuff. No, it requires us to be able to acknowledge one another and their gift. And that's very important. And that is the whole thing about the body coming together that it talks about there in 1 Corinthians 12. Not everybody's an eye, not everybody's a hand, they're not a foot. And just because you're not that doesn't mean you're not an important part of the body. But prophecy certainly is not a marker of a prophet. It means you have the gift of prophecy and that you're able to prophesy. And we should, and if you are in a house that has the fivefold ministry and is an apostolic, prophetic, has that foundation, there should be prophecy going on in that house. But that does not make you a prophet just because you can prophesy. And I will just be honest, half the time when people are doing personal prophecies, most of those don't hit the mark. Most of those are very soulish, meaning they're speaking into your wants and your desires. True prophecy really will challenge you in issues. And it sometimes brings correction to some things, which most of us don't really appreciate, if we're honest. At the time, we don't appreciate it, but we know it's truth, so we have to get in alignment with truth. And so usually that causes a shift. If it's an actual word from the Lord, then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to shift in this because I know that's truth, regardless if I like it or not. And so, most prophecy that people go and they're doing is more the edification and the exhortation, encouraging, exhorting, and those type of things.
I'm listening to some of the key words that you are using that I want to highlight. In talking about a prophet, you talked about equipping and how important it is for a prophet to equip the body along with the other fivefold ascension gifts: apostle,
Mhm.
prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, that collectively,
Yes.
as one, as a
Mhm.
team, they
Absolutely.
are supposed to equip. They're supposed to
Yes.
mature. They're
Mhm.
supposed to bring the body to a place of stability and maturity.
Yes.
About prophets, you quoted 1 Corinthians 14:3, the edification, the exhortation, and the comfort.
Mhm.
You look at this, and on one hand, you're talking about equipping, and on the other hand, you're talking about edifying and exhorting.
Mhm.
You're actually talking about different job descriptions
Mhm.
in what these things do. You're saying that prophets do this, prophecy does this,
Right.
and just because you do this doesn't mean you're this.
Right. Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
how come so many people today think that if I can prophesy all the time, that makes me a prophet? If you're saying it is, where's the disconnect?
I guess it's bad teaching.
That's the answer. That's
Just bad teaching.
absolutely the
Yeah.
answer. You
Yeah.
know, Apostle Barry Cook, a dear friend of mine, often says when people have questions, it's a cry for teaching.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
amazing how much poor teaching we
Mhm.
have.
Right. Well,
You
and
know,
people have a problem with correction, and a prophet in an office is actually called to bring correction and alignment so that you're going the right way. But they want to read that one passage about exhortation and all of that and say this is what a prophet does, and it's like, no, actually, they're calling you to line up. So you can fly right, you know?
what? Straighten up and fly
Yeah.
right? That's a prophetic word.
Yeah.
Now, you're doing something right now that many people would not associate with a prophet.
Mhm.
A lot of people think that prophets are like always real serious. You
Right.
know, they're like, they live in the glory zone.
Uh-huh.
They're not human. Their feet don't touch the ground. They don't live in a real world. They're
Yeah.
super spiritual, super spooky, or they're ogres that are mean and angry prophets. And you're
Mhm.
sitting here laughing and smiling.
Yeah.
I thought that the fruit of the spirit was love,
Right.
joy, peace. Where's angry in that?
It's not there.
It's not there. And so here's a
Yeah.
lady that I know personally. I can vouch for. She's a prophet. Look how much she's laughing. And yet I trust her.
Mhm.
What's the difference of our opinion of prophets and somebody that actually is one?
Right.
Folks, I'm showing you a different picture tonight. I'm showing you a different picture
Mhm.
of what many don't realize.
Mhm.
Now, sis, I want to go somewhere here with you tonight because I know the position that you hold in the
Mhm.
local house.
Right.
And when we say house prophet, you are the senior prophet in the house.
Yes.
You're not the only prophet in the
Right.
house,
Right.
but you are the senior prophet in the
Mhm.
house.
Mhm.
You are the prophet that's in partnership with the set woman, with the apostle in the house.
That's right.
And together you work as an apostolic prophetic team.
Yes.
But as the senior prophet in the house, you also raise up the other prophets in the
Mhm.
house and
Yeah.
help them develop in their gifting.
Right.
Not everybody has the metron or
Mhm.
the mantle to be a house prophet,
Right.
where they are the senior prophet in the house. And
Mhm.
many times we think, well, a prophet is a prophet is a prophet. and you're smiling and beginning to shake your head because obviously you do not agree. Go ahead.
Right. Well, I don't fit the mold of a typical prophet that you would call, somebody that, when I grew up, I'll just use this for reference. When I grew up, I was around some prophets and they were angry prophets. And you sat in church with your hands, tucked under, straight ahead because you were terrified. And it wasn't the fear of the Lord. It was the fear of, they might say something or come up with something about, they might call you out. And so that's how I grew up, was even being around. And I would sometimes look around and I would see people and they're just like terrified to breathe. We don't know what the prophet might call out, and I think some of that, just was really bad. There was bad teaching there, because God only reveals what's a need to know. You know what I mean? If it's a need to know and you need to know it, he's going to show you, but he doesn't show you everybody's stuff. And so people have an opinion about prophets that they just know everything about you just from the first time they meet you. And that's not actually true. And me, I don't want to know, I don't want to know everybody's stuff. So I'm not asking, to know everybody's stuff. But it's important, to kind of to know those differences and see those things. I mean, I was talking to somebody even today, and that what you've been kind of teaching and displaying, and I basically live what I preach. I'm living it out. So what you're showing them and displaying them and just them being around you, they're catching it. And I had a discussion about some things, and we were talking about a certain speaker, and it's like, you can receive some things, but then there's some red flags that come up, and she was repeating to me some things, and I was like, that's so encouraging. She's learning. She's got it. She was like, there were some things that I was kind of questioning that were red flags, and they said, well, if God said, and you can't, submit to man, you can only submit to God. And she's like, and I don't know about that. And that encouraged me, because I was like, it's getting in, that impartation, sometimes just being around, and hearing what the house prophet is saying tends to get in you, and that wisdom begins to get in you from what they know. And I know, even from being around my grandmother, she would know things. And I'm like that. I would just know things, and there would be things where like, oh, that's a check. When you have that check in your spirit, then you begin to ask some questions, and you go, what is that about? Why am I having that check? And then the Holy Spirit begins to reveal to you why you have that check. And even one of the conversations you and I had, you called me and you were like, what's going on with this? And I was like, well, I had a check, but sometimes you don't always know how to deal with those things. And so you're giving time for things to unfold so that you have more understanding about what to do and how to move forward in that. But that's part of the process, that even prophets go through when they're processing what the Lord is telling them. But I think I got off the topic that you wanted me to
go. No, you're good. You're good.
But yeah,
it's interesting. I'm listening to you talk, and I don't know, folks, if you read between the lines of some of what she's saying, but I hear the voice of a concerned leader that's concerned about what people are getting that she is helping to lead. And she's helping to equip and saying, oh, the teaching is getting, see, what we think of prophets, and this is because we just had horrible teaching. And the horrible teaching has told us you just got to be able to read everybody's mail.
Yeah.
And you just got to be able to hear from God. And you're hearing the heart of a leader that's saying the teaching is actually getting in there. That's different than just reading everybody's mail.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I'm hearing that so encourages me, And I know this because I have relationship with Andrea, is that she says, this thing that you and I talked about. How
Mhm.
many prophets actually build relationships with other leaders?
Right.
But she does. She has relationships with other leaders, as well as her partner in the house that she
Right.
submitted to.
Mhm.
And that's probably where we're going next, is dealing with, because she already touched on it already. She
Mhm.
already touched on the being in the house part, because we got so many Lone Rangers out there that aren't committed nor submitted anywhere. We'll go there next. But she's talked about being in the house, and how, you can get a word, but you submit it to
Right.
leadership, and you're not arrogant
Mhm.
about what God said,
Right.
which is showing me this is the voice of humility,
Mhm.
not pressing my own way. Don't you know I'm the prophet? Don't you know God said?
Right.
So you're showing the importance of relationship with other leaders
Mhm.
as being a prophet.
Yeah.
Could that be one of the missing ingredients
Absolutely.
why we have so many prophets
Mhm.
that are fruity, flaky, and nutty?
Absolutely. Uh-huh.
All right, so go there and
Yeah.
go in more depth into in the house.
Okay. Well, accountability is very important for everyone, but especially anyone that's leading others. And I'll emphasize that anyone that is leading others, teaching them anything, they should be accountable to someone or have the voice that is is able to tell them that something's wrong or that there might be error. Everyone needs that person. And I'm thankful that I have several in my life. But I mean, every once in a while you'll have a thought and you're like, I don't even know where that thought came from and out it comes. And then somebody's like, oh, I don't think that's right. And I know truth. So when I hear somebody tell me I don't think that's right, I might at first disagree with them, but then I'm like, oh, the Holy Spirit will tell me. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have to shift that in me. And I've gone to people before and have told them, thank you for that, because that helped me correct something. And if I would have kept down that way, I would have been in error. I would have been doing something that, that God hadn't sanctioned. And I would have thought it was okay because that was my own delusion. And I think that's where we can get into deception and sometimes even self-deception. And there's a truth about, well, God said something, and that is, if He says it, that's the principal thing. But I think we're often tested on whether or not we can allow others to speak into that, and also listen to what they're saying, and also trust that God speaks to them too. I mean, that's a thought, right? That
Mhm.
God can speak to them too. He's not just speaking to you. You're not the oracle, the only one that can hear. He speaks to others too. And you should be able to hear their voice and be able to listen to what they're saying in their instruction. And even if they're saying wait or right now is not the time, and you should be able to submit to that and go, okay, right now is not the time. I feel like it's the time, but I'm gonna wait because you feel like that's not the time. And that's the process of working together. And it's not that you always agree 100% of the time, but it's that you choose to yield to one another. You don't have to agree 100% of the time. You're not going to, because that's the difference in the giftings. It just is. There's a difference in the gift.
Right.
But if you're able to yield and honor each other and who you are, then it works. It works great and it's beautiful. And when you're able to submit one to another, and when you're able to be accountable one to another, it's such a beautiful thing. I think it creates a safety in the house where others are also able to learn that and display that accountability, mutual accountability, where they're not afraid, and they can also grow and become who they are, not feeling like people are going to be jealous of who they are. Or they can't, um, you know, be who God's called them to be or whatever because somebody's going to crush them or whatever. That's not necessary. And that shouldn't be in the body, but God is maturing us all so that we aren't displaying that attribute and becoming like that.
Go into the house dynamic a little bit, and if you want to go into, some of the real workings, the inner workings of,
Mhm.
your relationship with Apostle Kathy, and in your function and role as the house prophet
Mhm.
that's helping develop and raise up other prophetic gifts and voices in the house.
That's a long question.
Well, you
Okay.
think I'm going to make it easy on you?
No. Well, for like Kathy and I, um, our dynamics, we started out, and let me just tell you, it was not easy. We had basically a lot of warfare come, and I don't know a church or anybody that's trying to do anything like the Bible actually tells you to, that you don't get some backlash. And so we were like, we're going to step into. We knew what we were doing. We knew that we were stepping into the fivefold ministry, and everybody got set in their office, the ones that we had, and we had Kathy as the apostle, me as the prophet, Ronnie as the teaching leader, and we had Joy as the pastoral leader. And we have some evangelistic people that come in and out, and we have some people that are here now too, which is exciting. But even as Kathy and I, we were learning our roles. And I love how when you came in, you said you're yoked together, and you gave us that word that we were yoked together, because there had been some things that had tried to come in and bring some division. And the Lord began to speak to me and show me some things. And it was a very difficult season for us because here we've transitioned into the fivefold ministry, and all of a sudden, all this stuff is trying to come in and basically bring some separation into what God is wanting to join together, which was the apostle and the prophet working together. And so I would go to Kathy and I'd be like, and I hated doing it because I knew she wasn't really wanting to hear it. And that's a hard place for a prophet, because it's like, I know I got a message, but I know you don't want to hear it. And so I prayed, and I was just like, Lord, I do not know, I already know, that she doesn't want to hear this. And so, and she'll tell you too herself, she'll tell you, she's an open book. But I went in there and I was like, look, I can't shake this. I know there's something wrong. And what I'm seeing is division. And I just mapped out, this is what I see is going to happen. And it grieved me because it was like, I don't even know what to do about this. But this is what I see is going to happen if this continues. And she said, okay. And there were some things that I felt like needed to be done. And I was like, and I feel like this is what needs to be done. And I laid it out. And basically she put some things back, in my lap, which was good for me to process. And she basically said, well, you need to process what's going on with you. And I said, okay, I will do that. And I went and I did that, because you need to do that. You need to go. Is there anything in me any reason why I, would be upset with this individual or whatever it is? And so I did that. And then I came back to her and I knew she didn't want to hear it. This is the challenge, of a prophet, because they're hearing something from the Lord, and it's not everybody wants to hear the bad news. They want to hear the good news. They don't want to hear that something's not going right, And so I'm having this wrestling, and I go back again, and I'm like, Kathy, I have prayed, and I have prayed, and I know I have a knowing. It's this gut feeling, and I know. And I was like, and we need to have some conversations and meetings. And so we began to have some conversations and meetings, and some things began to be revealed. One of the things that was said, and this is a huge indicator to me if somebody's really there to help you or not, because the things that we're here to help. We're here to help you. We're here to serve you. All of these things. Well, then one of the things that came out, because I asked a question and I said, well, are you willing to submit to the authority here? And what the statement was made was, we don't submit to any man. And I was like,
Bye-bye.
that is not okay. You know what I mean? That, wait a minute. What? No, I don't think so. So that was a problem, and so, but things begin to get revealed and exposed so then it could be seen for what it was. And so now I'm like, I hear some things and I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't do that? I mean, their whole thing about even kingdom is there's leaders, there's, you don't have a title and it not carry weight and authority. Not everybody's the president of the United States.
That's right.
He has a job, he has a title, he has a function, and those jobs are important. In the military, not everybody is the commander of the, is the general. Everybody has their role and their function, but they're not all the head man. Jesus is the head and we submit to his authority, but he also puts others in authority, and he's teaching us that dynamic, and we need to learn that dynamic in the body as well. But so I submitted some things, and things began to get revealed and exposed. And as that exposure began to come, then even I believe God began to deal with some things, because we were praying and I was like, I do not want to see a church split. I don't want to see a split begin to happen. And I could see things beginning to happen, and this one talking to this one, how just pulling away. And so those kind of dynamics can come in, but the importance of the apostle and the prophet being together is they kind of form that hedge too of protection for the body.
Yes.
Where they basically are like, we're the yes and we're the no in this house. And if what you're doing isn't lining up, then it's a no. We're not going to do that. And a lot of people have a problem sometimes with people telling them no, but you need to be able to hear a no. And I think it's interesting when people get all, excited about that, because I've experienced some no's and it's always painful. I'm like, that is never the fun part of ministry of any kind, is hearing a no. That is always painful, because that's when you really get a character check. And what's in really begins to come out. It's going to manifest one way or the other, and you really get to see what's inside your own heart, and you get to make some choices, whether you're going to honor that no and submit to that, or go off on your own and do whatever it is, because I don't even know how many times, I'd be like, and I would be upset, sometimes with the no, but I'd have people come to me and be like, well, you can do this on your own and that on your own. And I'd be like, no, that's not what I need to do. That is not the right voice. But often you'll get that little chatter that's going on, and you have a choice to make. Whether you're going to do what God called you to do and stay in the place God called you to stay in, or you're going to make up some excuse, and really it's offense of why you need to leave that place. And so a lot of that is being able to grow up and mature and learn how to honor one another. And now that we've kind of went through some things and learned some things, we've also determined that there's accountability in some areas. Like, if you have people come into your house to preach, you should be able to ask them questions about what they spoke.
Absolutely.
If you cannot ask them questions, they should never, ever stand behind your pulpit.
You ought to say that again.
If you don't have that kind of relationship with the people you're bringing in to stand behind your pulpit, where you can ask them a question, they should never, ever be allowed to speak. Not in your house.
That's right.
If you don't know them and you're having them come in, then you need to have a conversation with them up front about what they're planning to do, and if they're able to be questioned, because that should not be going on. And you get a lot of things, and you get a lot of messes, because you have people come in and they're saying a lot of stuff, and that's not where you're going in the direction you're going in your house. And then you got to correct that stuff. And so that is very crucial, I believe. You should never allow that. If they're not able to be questioned, they should not have a place to speak, period.
Well, I obviously agree with that and believe that. And you know what happens when I come down to your house, because I always say to Apostle Kathy, I will only do
Hmm.
what you empower me to do,
Right.
because I am a man under authority
Well, and we trust you.
and I'm submitted to your authority. And even I think it was my second year there,
Hmm.
and Apostle Kathy saying, "Well, the buckets are here, and you know what to do." And I turned to Angie and I said, "We need to actually receive an offering. This ain't gonna cut it.
Hmm.
We need to encourage the people to give, cast the vision, and lead by example." And she said, "You're right. You talk to Kathy." and so I turned to Apostle Kathy and I said, Angie and I were just talking, and we think that, you really need to encourage
Hmm.
people to give, not just say the buckets are here, and
Right.
actually receive an offering. And I said, I would be honored
Hmm.
if you would allow me to receive an offering tonight so that I can show how it's supposed to be done and actually lead by example and be the first one to put money in. And
Hmm.
she looks at me and she says, well, I feel led to let you do it. It's like that. But if
Hmm.
Apostle Kathy would have said to me, no, no, Michael, that's really not how we operate in this house. This
Right.
is what we do. I would have said, okay. And that
Yeah.
would have been the end of it.
Right.
But she said, I feel led to let you do. Now, when we come down and we have the Lions and Eagles conference every year, now
Hmm.
it's like, all right, Don, you're going to receive the offering tonight, and Michael's preaching, and Angie, you're going to receive the offering, and so's preaching, and Papa Anthony, you're going. And now it's like it's part of the order of service
Right.
where it didn't used to be,
Right.
but
Hmm.
it was submitted
Right.
and then yielded to what she said.
Right.
And it's come to the place where you do trust
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
there's a relationship that's
Mhm.
been built.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't built just because we talked on Facebook.
That's right. Hmm.
It was built because we actually got together.
Right.
And it's amazing how relationships do get locked in
Hmm.
when you break bread together.
Right.
Something just happens in relationships when you're doing it over food. The
Absolutely.
relationships go to another level.
Right.
There's
Uh-huh.
something that happens when you get to hug somebody's neck for real
Right. Uh-huh.
and not a virtual hug. We send those little virtual hugs now.
Hmm.
They are a poor substitute
Right.
for a real hug.
That's right.
But when you meet somebody and you lock in, it
Right.
changes the dynamic of the relationship.
Right. Hmm.
Now, you have that within the house,
Yes.
and you're developing it with leaders outside the house.
Yeah. Hmm.
You're talking about this mutual accountability that
Hmm.
you have to Apostle Kathy and
Right.
she to you, how you
Hmm.
work in partnership.
Hmm.
And you're talking about how the rest of the ministry gifts in the house have come into alignment with that.
Right.
And those that weren't in agreement and we don't submit to any man, it was like, there's the door, see ya.
Yeah.
And they're not there anymore.
That's right.
Now I want to go to the next level about your role
Hmm.
as a house prophet.
Okay.
Because as being the house prophet, one of your assignments is because you have such a strong prophetic mantle on the house,
Hmm.
you attract prophetic gifts.
Absolutely. Hmm.
But somebody has got to train them.
That's right. Hmm.
Somebody's got to teach them.
Hmm.
Somebody's got to say, this was good. This, not so good.
That's right.
This, you could do a little, this was
Yeah.
good. This was good. This season, not so good.
Yeah.
And that's part of your job
Mhm.
description now.
It is. Yeah.
So
It
talk about
absolutely is.
that.
Okay. Well, this is a good subject. Well, I have a lot of grace for people too, because, there's things that I don't know it all. And I think it's
You
refreshing.
don't?
I don't. I don't.
Oh,
I don't know it all. And so, and I have a lot of grace for people that are growing and learning and everything else. I also in a process. I don't know it all myself, but I am learning and I am able to teach. And so there's been times I've missed it. And so then you're just like, well, that was probably a timing thing, that needed to cook a little more. It's in process. But I learned those things too. So I know how to also discern that. That's in process. That's, or, and I've had conversations with many here, where we've had conversations about different things. It's hard to not get offended when you get corrected. And so that you really know somebody's being able to grow, and they're growing when they're not getting offended and they're able to grow and walk through that when you correct them. And so I look for those things at times, because I know that that's my role, is to, help them to learn and develop. And there's things that even happened with me, and I can use myself as an example. I also I could be a screamer myself. I'd get passionate and I'd get that mic, and it was like a roar going out into the audience. And I don't know how long I did that, and nobody told me a thing. And then one day I'm walking into Kathy's office, and this is my uncle as well, but Ronnie is our teaching leader. And I know he was just waiting for this opportunity to tell me. And so I'm walking by, and it's like he's just itching, And so he lets it out, and he's like, "Do you realize you yell on that microphone?" I was like, "I really didn't realize that."
I
I
would
know I
never
get
do such a thing.
And so he was like, "You realize that nobody can hear what you're saying because it goes out as a roar." And that I was just like, "Oh, how long have I done that?" And no one has said a word. No one has told me.
Wow.
I was mortified. And I was like, I can't believe nobody said that to, even mentioned it. And after that, I began to catch myself, because, that's good mic etiquette. You should learn mic etiquette. But I had not been taught this before this point in time, and nobody felt the need to tell me. And it would have been very helpful. So I didn't get offended by that. And I didn't go, well, that's how God uses me, to just yell over the microphone. I did not get offended by that. I was quite upset that I hadn't been told beforehand. And so I was like, okay, so I began to ask the Lord even to help me to pull the mic back, because I could, I can feel it when it's about to come. So I can pull the mic back, And so I'd start doing that. And thankfully I had somebody else back there, and they would be like, giving me the signal, So I learned, how to pull the mic back when I would begin to get impassioned in the prophecy or whatever it was I was releasing, because that would happen to me often as I just began shouting it out. And, but I also knew the importance of people being able to hear. There's no point in prophesying and speaking over the mic if nobody can hear the words that are being said. And so I had to learn that myself. And that was a correction that I got, that even to this day, I like try to remind myself if I get really excited, which typically now I'm a little more able to do that without just belting it out. But at first it was just getting belted out, everywhere. The passion was just coming out through the microphone and through the roar. But, and I've had to bring people, have conversations, well, about timing even, because some things it's just not the time, or it becomes really long. And I've, done this myself, where it's like, okay, it's time to just sit down, this is time for this to be over, But, that's important for people to learn too. When it's timely, there's somebody going to speak, whatever, you need to release that word in a timely manner and then sit down, And so And those are the things that you begin to learn. And I myself, I know this about me: when I'm in process and I'm processing something, if I get up to speak, it may come out, because I know me. I learn how I am. And sometimes it's like, well, I get up to give a word, and then there's something else on the back burner. And so it's bubbling back there. And if I'm not quick to release that, then that also will begin to get released. So sometimes I have to tell myself, is you can just sit down here, because you got something you're processing through, and it's not time to release that yet. And so even me, I have to remind myself, and I'm the set prophet in the house. So I have to remind myself of those things. So I'm not going to be so arrogant to go, well, I know how to do all this and I do it all perfectly, because we're all in process of learning at times. And so I have a lot of grace with them, but I do like to teach them things like, and I've had conversations with people about keeping it short. It doesn't have to be, 15 minutes long. It can be shortened. And a lot of times people are not going to remember what was said if it's this huge 5-minute exhortation, rather than it's a 1 or 2 minute exhortation, and they can actually receive that. So we've had those kind of conversations, and we've had conversations about soulish words, where if it's something that you're pondering, if it's something that you're dealing with your own family in, or something you're disturbed over, or with someone else, you probably don't need to get up and pray over that, because that is something that's in your soul, because you're working on that issue. And so we've had those kind of conversations as well as sometimes I've seen things where it's like, the Lord, I am a seer, so every once in a while the Lord will show me a spirit behind something. And so one time the Lord showed me over a couple individuals that there was an actual python spirit, and I know that to be divination. And I could see it whispering and in this individual's ears, and I could also see it with another individual. Well, I began to have some conversations with those individuals about witchcraft in their background and divination in the background, because the Lord revealed some things to me that had to do with them. And as the prophet of the house too, it's my job to help them to heal, to get delivered, and all of those things as well. And so we had conversations, and a bunch of things began to come out. And I've told that individual over and over again how proud I am of them, that they were able to receive that and get some of the healing they needed, and to repent of those things that were bothering them, and actually even bloodline issues that they had to deal with. And so we've dealt with some of those things in the house. And so it's really good when people are able to receive from you, but you're not everybody's cup of tea,
How well do I know that?
And so, not everybody's going to be able to receive for you. And that was something that's, because I'm very relational. I'm very, you know, I just love people. And so it's hard for me to not be relational and be just me with everyone. And but I have come to realize that I'm not everybody's cup of tea. And so, they don't have to receive from me. If they can't, they probably need to find somebody else that they can receive from. And I'm okay with that. But yeah, strong cup of coffee or a cup of whiskey, whatever you want to call it. The hard stuff, only the good hard stuff.
Well, I believe me, I fully understand that. And I've been saying for a long, long time, I am not everybody's cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. And you help those you can help.
That's right.
And you help those that can receive from you. And
Mm-hmm.
not everybody can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a sign of maturity when you realize that,
Yeah.
But two things came to me as you were sharing. And one was something my mom used to say when you were talking to people about, it doesn't always have to be real long, that could have been said
Mm-hmm.
with less verbiage or could have been
Mm-hmm.
shorter. My mom used to say, we need to learn to stand up, speak up, and shut up.
Right. I like it.
That was mom's
Yeah.
instruction in teaching people about
Mm-hmm.
prophesying. But you made this phrase about 3 times tonight. And just in case people do not know what you're referring to,
Okay.
You said a soulish word.
Right.
Define that for people so they know where you're coming from.
Well, that's usually from, well, I would call it want and desire, even. Um, I would even say, well, the soul is defined as the mind, will, and emotional realm. So it would probably be more of the emotional part. And a lot of times when people are speaking to that part, it's something that, and when I say something that they're dealing with, like relationally, so they're disturbed in their soul because your spirit, it does get disturbed about other spiritual issues, but they're disturbed in their soul because of something that they're dealing with personally. So I would say that would be a soulish area. So if for instance, you had something going on with your sibling, and then you get up in front of everybody and you're trying to correct them or deal with that, that would be a soulish area that
Okay.
you're dealing with. Yeah. Or even, you know, there's just a lot of areas you could go to if you were going, if you have problems with, I could use men, for example. If you have oh, well, the men aren't doing what they need to do, they need to rise up and do what they're supposed to do, but the history behind it, you have history there, or you're having an issue there, I would call that more of a soulish thing.
Okay. So the soulish thing could be either something that you yourself are processing,
Mhm.
that thing that maybe you got on the back burner, that God's
Right.
got the fickle finger of fate going on in your spirit,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you need to work on this, and
Right.
it's still back there in process, and you
Mhm.
begin to prophesy it
Right. Right.
publicly when
Mhm.
God's really dealing with you, but you're casting it on everybody else.
Right. Mhm.
Or it could be where you're speaking to the soulish desire of the recipient,
Right.
not necessarily the word of God,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
because
Uh-huh.
they've got itching ears and you're tickling them, telling them what they want to hear.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. I
Absolutely. Yeah, I used to get soulish prophecies all the time when I was young, and I'd know because I just would know. But this would be the word I would get all the time. You're going to be a singer. I'm not called to sing. I'm not called to sing, but I did have a desire because most of my family were singers. And they're very skilled at singing. And so I had that desire in my soul, but that was not the word of the Lord. And I would know every time I got it. And I was a young girl. And I mean, from the young age to a teenage age, every time somebody prophesied, and it wasn't the word of the Lord usually, but that's what they would prophesy over me was you're going to be a singer or this or that. I mean, that was just the thing. And I knew every time. And I've had people prophesy over me where I was like, I remember one time I was in Bible school and it was like, they just did an announcement about don't be praying and prophesying, those be praying and prophesying over everybody, and they basically said, don't allow everybody to prophesy or pray over you if they don't have a badge. So they set some order. And then the lady right in front of me turned to me and began to pray for me. And I was just like, what's going on here? But after she got through praying, I turned to my friend and I was like, now pray that off of me. I did not want anything she had to say because order was just set.
right.
And she wasn't going to submit to the order. And I don't want to receive that. I knew that as a teenager because I could feel it on the inside of me. No, I don't want that word. That's not the word of the Lord. But I also do, because we have a tendency to say, God said, God said, God said, if you're really teachable, sometimes you will say, even, and probably perceive is a better word. I feel like the Lord is saying, I perceive that the Lord is saying, because that gives room for someone to even correct or say or bring some instruction there. And if you just say, this thus saith the Lord, there's no room for any instruction or correction there. So I do tend to tell people, you can say, I feel like the Lord is saying, or I perceive that the Lord is saying, or I see, because there's a lot of seers too, and they're seeing something. This is what I see that the Lord is doing or he's showing me. And that gives room for process where other people can then input into that, because even as prophets, we only see in part. I
That's
only have
right.
a part. I have a part of the message, but it may not be the full picture that the Lord is wanting to paint. And it takes everybody's part and every joint to paint the full picture. I'm only going to give my part. I'm only prophesying in part. And so it isn't the full measure of what the Lord is doing. And so we need those other people that come along. The dreams are like that too. The Lord is speaking. I do believe that the dreamer should be able to interpret that, but often other people can impart something into that brings a deeper revelation.
Yeah.
And so if you are submitting that dream, for instance, and then others are able to input into that, it can really build that, and you can have a deeper revelation than if you just held that and you didn't share it. And so it's important to be able to collaborate with one another, even in the prophetic arena, because you get a bigger picture of what the Lord is saying than just a part. And there's things that the Lord has spoke to me that he develops over time. And so sometimes it's a timing thing of where he's still developing what he's speaking to you. And over time, he begins to develop the message of it, because a lot of things, even the Lord begins to show me, become a message. And then I get the fullness of what he's speaking. And it then becomes a message, but it takes a little bit of process to allow him to begin to speak into that thing, and you begin to ask him questions about that, and then you begin to see the picture and the message that he's really speaking through that.
Wow, we've got people now want to start asking questions.
Okay.
Tim, I know you, and so you can go ahead and type a question in, and we'll do our best to deal with it. Um, Andrea, I do want to ask you something
Mhm.
else about being a house prophet and regarding having a prophetic company,
Mhm.
because some prophets are egomaniacs. Well, I'm the chief prophet or I'm the
Mhm.
senior prophet. And, if God's going to say anything, he's going to say it through me. As opposed to you just said, hey, I know in part, I prophesy in part, I only got the part that I've got.
Mhm.
Somebody else may have another piece to this puzzle. So,
Mhm.
talk about a prophetic company as opposed to being the almighty, all knowing Oz.
Oh yeah. No. I think the Lord really worked that out, like, of me. But yeah, it's very important to be able to hear from others. And often when I'm in a setting where there's a lot of prophetic people and I know who they are, like, you don't always know who everybody is, when you're in just a general meeting, but when I'm in an area and I know where people are, I want to hear and I want to know what they're seeing and hearing, because the Lord is speaking through that. And because I do know it's a part, it's so important to have those elements coming together, because then you begin to really see what God is saying in the fullness of what he's speaking, when you might just have one little part. And often how God will use is he'll just use one to speak this and one to speak that and another, to do tongues and interpretation, and he's painting a picture of what he's saying. And if we're listening to how everything's unfolding, then we begin to get where he's wanting us to go, and we begin to move in that direction then. And I
Yeah.
think, there's even things like I've told people that are seeing things, that are seers, well, I'm seeing this. It's like, well, then it probably needs to be done, and there's prophetic movement. There's things that need to be done. And if you're seeing it, and I use this as an example, when Jesus said he only said what he heard, hearing, and he only did what he saw, visionary. So he was seeing something. So we can about, conclude that he had a vision of something, and that's what he did.
Right.
He was shown something. And so that would speak that you need to do something with what you saw. And when you begin to do that, then it begins to create movement. But it's so important to be able to have all of that come together, and not just, it's not any big eyes and little U's, it is a company and team of people. And sometimes I've gotten to where I step back a little and I try to, but it's like, if there's a void, it's hard not, that something needs to be said or released. And sometimes I'll just go, I know somebody's got something, and I just wait.
Yeah.
There was one morning, and we have like an early morning service. We're doing prophetic worship and decrees. And I got up and was supposed to transition, and the Lord told me, don't say nothing. And I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. That's not awkward, but, and so I got up there and I held the mic, but I knew I wasn't going to speak. And so I'm just standing there holding the mic, and then Ronnie begins to prophesy. And then after he's finished prophesying, Jessica begins to prophesy. And after she's done, another one comes up. I hand them the mic. They begin to prophesy. There was something the Lord wanted to do. He didn't even tell me. Sometimes I tell him, I'd like to know some of the details. I'd like to know some of these details. But I've gotten to the place where I trust him, and I trust his voice, and I know it. I know his voice. And so it's like, okay, you want me to get up and you just want me to stand there and be quiet? I can do that.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing how he just began to move, and what was being spoke, we needed to hear. It was such an encouraging word that we needed to hear as a body. And so we just have to be sensitive to his spirit, and we don't have to be a mic hog, and I typically try not to do that. The only time I get up there to reiterate something is when I feel like it wasn't heard, because I know if there's a prophetic word that's released, and if somebody isn't able to speak it where somebody can hear it, I will often get up there and say, this is what they said. Did you hear what they said? Or I will go, if they speak something and it hits the target, like I was hearing that and I was seeing that, I'll go, I want to confirm that I was hearing the exact same word. Why? Because it puts authority to that. Me as the house prophet confirming, because they might know that was the word of the Lord, the person giving it, but everybody else might be questioning, was that the word of the Lord? And then me getting up there and going, that was the word of the Lord, puts a stamp on what they just said. And so I will often do that too, because I want everybody else to know that that's what the Lord is saying, because I heard that exact same thing. We were in a meeting just yesterday, and I'm hearing things and sometimes seeing things, and other things are going on, and so there's not really, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with all that yet, Lord. I'm just gonna marinate in it, And then somebody goes, well, this is what I'm seeing. I'm hearing this, like Peter with and God saying, feed my sheep. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I heard the exact same thing. And so I looked over at him and I said, that's right, because I heard the exact same thing, and I saw a staff, feed my sheep. And so I could just confirmed what he was saying, because it hit the target. That's what the Spirit was saying. It's like a river flowing, and if you're in the river, you should be flowing together in that river.
So as the house prophet, many times you become the facilitator of the prophetic flow, inviting people to get in the river.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now that's a whole big different picture than I am the voice of God to this house.
Right.
My goodness, what a difference. James, let me answer your question. And son, you already know the answer to this. James said, usually the first function is not to the office of a prophet if you're called to that, correct? Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm.
There are many stages and places of development in the prophetic en route to the office of the prophet. Nobody starts there.
No.
Usually people start prophesying sporadically.
Mhm.
Then they may get to the place where they may prophesy consistently. Then they may begin to get revelation from like the word of knowledge or the word of wisdom to go along with their consistent prophesying. But then they begin to develop as a teacher and or preacher or both,
Mhm.
because before you can be an equipping ascension gift prophet, you've got to be able to equip, and that comes by teaching and preaching. And then once that happens and all those other stages of prophetic development have been gone through, then you can be recognized and affirmed or confirmed as a prophet. Not until.
Right.
So you're right, but you already know that because you and I have talked about it many times on our private calls. I'm looking at the chat here. Yes, Carolyn, house prophet facilitates the prophetic flow. Absolutely right. That's one of the jobs of the house prophet. I'm just looking to see if there's any more questions. I don't see any other questions that are here. My dear sister, is there anything else you want to hit on while you are here with me?
Not that I know.
Not that you know of. I know I've stretched you beyond what you're normally used to being stretched, but that's what Papa Mike, Uncle Mike is for, to stretch you a little bit.
Right.
But tell everybody where FGCC is, how they can follow the church and follow your ministry.
Our church is located in Odessa, Texas. And I do have Facebook. It's Andrea Cooper Hess. And we also have a website, but I will have to type it in the comments because I can't quite remember what the website of our church is yet. But I think it's Full Gospel Covenant Church. I'm pretty sure that's what it's under. So that's kind of how you can see what we're doing here. And we do have lots of events coming up. So if you go on to even our Facebook page at Full Gospel Covenant Church, you can kind of see what events we have coming. I know we're going to have Dr. Patty Amston and Anthony Turner back. And everybody loves Anthony, and he's just awesome. And so we'll be having them, and you could always just come visit us if you want to stop in. And I guess that's it.
Absolutely. And then I will be invading them again next October. I will be back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally become one of the highlights of my year to do the Lions and Eagles conference every year. And I love the church. I love the people. I love the leadership. I love Apostle Kathy. I love Andrea. I love Joy. Joy is my laughing partner. I love Ronnie. I love Jennifer. I mean, I love the people in that house, and I know them, and they are very near and dear to me. No. I'm just looking at Tim's comment here. There is a lot that happens before you can go even ankle deep in the prophetic gifting. Yeah, you're right. It's a growing process, Tim. And there is that picture when first they went to the ankles, and then it was up to the thighs, and then it was the loins, and then finally it was something they could swim in. And you do grow into that. Absolutely. Abigail, God bless you, sweetheart. It's so good to see you on YouTube tonight. She's part of the house in Odessa. And what's Lisa? My daughter Lisa is on. They make you feel at home. Yes, they do. They do make you feel at home. And I'll tell you this: they know how to treat visitors. They know how to treat guests. They really do make you feel like family. They really, really do. And so if you're in the Midland, Odessa area and you're looking for a home church, anywhere in that, what is it? Permian Basin? Am I saying that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Anywhere in that Permian Basin, which is over in West Texas. It's a great place to go and visit. if you're looking for a home church. And if you're going through and traveling, it's a great place to stop in. Maybe one of these days I'll get to make a second trip within a year instead of just waiting for the annual big bang. But no, I would be very open to that. I would be very open to coming back more than just once a year. It's one of my favorite places to go.
Yeah, everybody gathers together and the hugging and the tears, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, that we do, and we know how to eat and have fun too.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how to play chef and make everybody go off their diet. The diet goes out the window when I show
Right.
up. I'm not good for people's waistlines. Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
Well, my dear sister, I love you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me tonight. Bless Rocky for sparing you to be with me. I love your husband. He's a great
Yeah,
man.
I do
He's
too.
got such a great heart. He's so
Uh-huh.
supportive of you and the
Yes.
call that's on your life.
Mhm.
And he works hard. He's
Yes.
he reminds me of a Brooks and Dunn song. He's a hardworking man.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
But he's a great man. He's a great man, and I absolutely love Rocky. I love your kids. I can't believe how much they're growing. Every time I look at them, I'm like, oh Lord Jesus, because I
Mhm.
knew them when, and
Yep.
it's not when anymore.
No.
But let me just give you all a programming note. Next week, Prophet Nicole Cool will be with me. She's originally from South Africa. She came to the U.S. as a missionary to the U.S. She now lives in Virginia, and she will be with me next week. Very interesting discussion. I spent about an hour and a half with her on the phone the other day, and we're going to be talking about marrying business and ministry. I promise
Mm.
you, it'll be a very unique conversation, and she has some very unique perspective. So don't miss next Thursday night with Prophet Nicole when we talk about marrying business and ministry. Well, folks, until next week, I remind you in the immortal words of my dear friend, Dr. Don Hughes, God loves you, and we love you. And there ain't nothing you can do about it. Good night, everybody. God
Right.
bless you. We'll see you soon.